Howdy, folks. Once again, this is Donnie, and I just wanted to do another update here on the saga of Red Hat discontinuing CentOS, as we all know and love it. And in case you have not heard the news, in case you've been living under a rock, and haven't yet heard the news, the Red Hat company decided last month, back in December of 2020, that they were going to discontinue the enterprise-ready version of CentOS, just turn it into a rolling release development version, which is not really going to be suitable for real production use, right? Or for enterprise use, because in enterprise you want something that's completely stable. You don't want rolling release stuff. But anyway, Red Hat has now announced, and by the way, yeah, this news is about a week or so old. I'm sorry, I'm just now getting to it, but that's okay. Stick with me anyway, because you'll get to hear my thoughts about this. Okay, so anyway, Red Hat introduces free RHEL for small production workloads and development teams. And of course, they have had a free of charge version of Red Hat for a while. It's their developer subscription. And if you sign up for the developer subscription, it's free of charge. And as things are right now, you download the Red Hat and you get to run it on one machine. You get to run one instance of it. So if you got a whole team of developers, then every developer has to have his or her own account. And the way it works is that you go to Red Hat, create an account, download the Red Hat, and install it on physical machine or virtual machine, either one. And then you got to jump through some hoops. You got to get their security key, and there's a little utility that you run from the command line, and you will paste that security key into that utility, and that then will register your account with Red Hat. And that way, after they do that, or after you do that, then Red Hat will determine what you can access. Now, if you have a free of charge developer account, you can access the Red Hat repositories that contain development software. Nothing else. So if you're like a web application developer, you're developing web applications, well, guess what? You can't use your you can't use your Red Hat developer subscription to set up a web server to test those applications. You got to use something else. Okay? You want to test them, you got to use some other free of charge distro that does have all of the repositories accessible to you. And that was one of the key reasons that CentOS was so popular. It was popular with developers because there were no hoops to jump through, no registration, no having to enter security keys to get access to the repositories, no restrictions on what repositories you could access. And you get your CentOS, download your CentOS ISO file, install it on a physical machine, install it on as many physical machines as you want it, or as many virtual machines as you want it, and you want it to develop your software and test it on a web server, you could do that, all with the CentOS, right? And anything that you did on CentOS would work on Red Hat. So it was very easy, even Red Hat customers were using CentOS, right? And just because it was easier, they could develop it on CentOS, test it on CentOS, and if they had to transfer everything to a Red Hat server, yeah, they could do that. It's still going to work, right? But here, in response to some of the backlash that they were getting from the CentOS users after the announcement that they were discontinuing CentOS, then they decided they were upgrade things a bit. So what they're doing here is that now, instead of just being able to install the developer's subscription on one machine, now we're going to be able to do it on up to 16 machines. And in addition, they're also going to allow you to install this on a cloud platform. So that's pretty cool, right? There we go. So yeah, you might have to pay the hosting fees for the cloud platform, but the RHEL itself is going to be for development and small production workloads. Now, they're saying for small production workloads, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that, right? But anyway, they said that the updated individual developer subscription will be available by February 1st, 2021. And I'm recording this, what day is this? I don't even know. The 27th. So I'm recording this on the 27th of January, 2021. So it'll be available in just a few days. Okay? So that's kind of good, but still not as good as it was with the CentOS, where you had no restrictions, over what you could do with it. All right. And then down here, we see, hey, what about me, you might ask? I use CentOS all the time. I don't want to switch to CentOS Stream. And Red Hat understands that many CentOS users are in this boat. And we know that these programs don't address every CentOS use case, so we aren't delivering more ways to get RHEL easily. We're working on a variety of additional programs for other use cases and plan to provide another update in mid-February. All right. Okay. And of course, this doesn't address what's probably the most important CentOS use case. It's used by hosting, web hosting, and cloud providers as a free as in beer Linux distribution. And CentOS, along with Ubuntu Linux, are the most popular free, and that's free as in beer, free of financial charge, Linux distributions for companies wanting a solid, well-documented Linux server, one that they can support themselves. And these companies, CentOS users must look to other alternatives, such as the in-work CentOS Linux clones, Rocky Linux, and Alma Linux, right? So, but Red Hat wants to keep its CentOS users, and they want to turn them into RHEL customers. So the company announcement noted, we want to make RHEL easier to use and are removing many barriers that stand in the way, working to keep pace with the evolving needs of Linux users, our customers, and our partners. So this requires us to continuously examine our development and business models to meet these changing goals. We believe that these new programs and those to follow work toward that goal. We aren't done with this work. We want to hear from you whether or not your needs fall into one of the use cases described here. Okay, so anyway, as I said in the previous video, the fact that the Red Hat company has discontinued the enterprise-ready version of CentOS makes them the only commercial provider of Linux which does not have a free of charge version of their distro that users can use without restrictions. Oracle, they got Oracle Linux, download it free of charge, install it, use it. Okay, SUSE has OpenSUSE, which is just SUSE Enterprise that's repackaged as OpenSUSE. I mean, that's what it's based on. They build it from SUSE enterprise source code. So yeah, it's ready to go for an enterprise, right? Totally free of charge. Ubuntu, there's no distinction between the free of charge version and a paid version. So with Ubuntu, you just download Ubuntu. And by the way, if you want, the only distinction with Ubuntu is that they do have their long-term support releases, which come out in April of every even-numbered year. And then they have their non-long-term support releases that come out in the interim. Trust me, if you want something that's totally stable for enterprise use, stick with those long-term support releases. I learned that the hard way, okay? But anyway, that's kind of beside the point here. But the point I'm trying to make is that all these other commercial Linux vendors offer totally free of charge versions of their operating system without any restrictions whatsoever. But Red Hat is trying to basically force everybody to buy their product, okay? And so by ending CentOS, as I said, they're the only Linux vendor now that does not offer a free of charge version of their product without any restrictions. Okay, so we saw in the last video too, where there were some people at the Red Hat company. They were speaking off the record. They didn't want to be identified, but they were basically whining. Oh, the CentOS users, they're keeping us from becoming a $10 billion company. We're only a $1 billion company now because CentOS is out there and everybody's using CentOS for free. It's keeping us from becoming a $10 billion company. Oh, wah. They're taking food out of the mouths of our butlers and our chauffeurs and our maids. Okay, I added that last part, okay? Oh, but you see what I mean here, right? But the harsh reality, right, is that, ending the CentOS program, it's not going to magically make everybody become paying customers for Red Hat, right? It's just not, because there are too many free of cost alternatives out there that people can go to. And of course, Red Hat Enterprise Linux is like every other Linux distro in that it is licensed under the free open source software licenses, which means that they are required to make the source code available to anybody who wants it. And it's perfectly legal, perfectly ethical for anybody who wants to download that source code and make their own distros, okay? And really the reason for that, you think about it, okay? There's very, very little software in here that Red Hat developers actually created. And now, I'm not saying that they're totally freeloaders, totally building on other people's work, or anything like that, because the Red Hat company certainly has developed a lot of original code. They have contributed back to the Linux ecosystem, right? So, I got no beef with them about that. But still, you look at the Linux kernel. The Red Hat developers did not create the Linux kernel. That was developed upstream, okay? Developed originally, of course, by Linus Torvalds. It's now maintained primarily by Linus Torvalds, but there are a lot of other developers, both within Red Hat and outside of Red Hat, who develop code for the Linux kernel and who contribute to the Linux kernel. And same thing with the whole operating system ecosystem, what we call the GNU system, okay? Like when you open up a terminal, you see the bash shell, okay? Red Hat did not develop the bash shell. That was developed by people who volunteered to work for the Free Software Association. And a lot of these utilities, you type these commands into the bash shell. Those utilities, a lot of them developed by Richard Stallman and a lot of his assistants, right? So yeah, and even like web server, okay, Apache web server was not developed by Red Hat, okay? So yeah, they do just like every other Linux distro developer and vendor. They take packages that were developed by other people and put them all together, and they might contribute code to these packages. Some of them they might not contribute code to, but whatever. They're taking all these packages, putting them all together and creating a Linux distro. And all of these packages are licensed under some sort of a free, as in speech, software license. Okay, so that's why it's perfectly ethical and fine for people to take their source code and make their own distros, and it's also why Red Hat, the Red Hat company, is required to make that source code available, right? So yeah, somebody is going to make, if it hadn't been for CentOS, somebody else would have created a free of charge clone, and actually there have been other free of charge Red Hat clones in the past. Some of them are not with us anymore, but and some of them are. But yeah, the people. Like I say, people would have been creating those other distros, and Red Hat would still not be a $10 billion company, right? And ending the CentOS program is not going to make them a $10 billion company either, because there are already at least 2 distros. We looked at them in the last time too. There's Oracle Linux and something called Springdale Linux, which are viable replacements for CentOS. And also, we just saw in this article where Rocky Linux is upcoming, and so is Alma Linux. And so those are going to be 2 free of charge replacements for CentOS. So yeah, this is still not going to make them a $10 billion company, okay? And if anything, this is kind of, I think it's still going to leave a bad taste in the mouths of CentOS users, regardless of what types of new programs that Red Hat will come up with, to try to appease the CentOS users, okay? You think about it. They brought out CentOS 8, and they promised that it would be supported for 10 years, just like every other version of CentOS. And then they pulled the rug out, right? All of a sudden they said, oh, by the way, we've decided that we're not going to support this for 10 years after all, so now you've got a year to move over to something else, okay? So anyway, but then again, maybe I'm being a bit too hasty here. Maybe they will come up with something good that really will satisfy all the CentOS users. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. And at any rate, there's no need to panic just yet. So just keep your powder dry, keep calm, and you keep using CentOS for the time being. And you've got until the end of 2021. So that gives you basically about 11 and a half months now, before you really have to worry about it. But we'll keep you updated, and hopefully news about news about what Red Hat will be doing to help out the CentOS users will be forthcoming real soon, and we'll take a look at it then, okay? But anyway, I think that's all for that. Okay, and with all that said, it's time for a word from my sponsor, which is me, and my book, Mastering Linux Security and Hardening, 2nd edition. And if you are a Linux administrator or you are studying to be a Linux administrator, you want to check out this book, okay? You want to be able to set up your Linux systems to be just as secure as possible, and this book can help you out. And it does cover CentOS 8. I know CentOS 8 is going away. That's okay, because everything I wrote in here about CentOS 8 will apply to any other RHEL 8 type distros. So whether it be Oracle Linux, Springdale Linux, the upcoming Alma Linux or Rocky Linux, that's okay. It's still going to cover you, okay? You're still going to be okay with this. But, and also, even though the book is not a complete certification guide for any certification exam, if you're going for a certification exam, such as Linux Professional Institute Level 3 Security, most of what's in this book will be covered in that exam, okay? Doesn't cover the whole exam, but it's still going to help you out tremendously. So anyway, purchase links are in the video description below. And that's all I got for now. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.